Escaping the Fold by Vincent Merkel. My Mates continued. An athletic woman, she jogged with quick, nimble steps down the trail. I was not going to fall for another trap, although I think she knew that she had gotten her point across with the snare that she so neatly caught me with earlier that evening. I watched where she went, and she kindly let me follow. She hopped up to a gray pillar of stone just inside the edge of the jungle and disappeared. Then she quickly reappeared. Like a wildcat, she jumped straight up into the branch of a thick and aged tree. I went to the base of the granite outcropping and looked up. She waited, crouched on the branch, and signaled for me to come up. I shook my head side to side, and she continued. I watched her disappear through the lower branches. Upon losing the sound of the leaves rustling from the slight bending of the branches that supported her weight, I stopped and listened to the silence. Turning my voice toward the place that she last was, I made a clicking sound with my cheek and tongue. The noise was that of a tree frog I had eavesdropped on earlier while gathering firewood. I listened in the darkness, and the sound repeated in the distance. I carefully followed, stepping only on hard ground, stones, and trees. I saw one of the thylacines ahead of me. The other two flanked me at a good distance, and whenever I walked in the grass, they followed, disrupting my trails with zigzagging and overlapping paths. I chased the sounds of the chirping tree frog in the jungle for almost an hour. The nimble and fit girl dropped from the branches in front of me and pointed up. She nodded her head, yes, and climbed another rocky staging place and jumped into another tree. She called down to me,
"You must come."
I hung my weapon on my back, along with the rest of my meager belongings, and jumped up behind her. She climbed to a fair height and grasped a thick vine and swung to another tree limb 40 feet away. The vine was thick and gnarled. It branched off and was well anchored to the towering treetops. I followed her thusly for what seemed a very long time, but was probably only about a half an hour. She made each landing with an awkward confidence. She finally touched down onto one of the stone pedestals that patterned the jungle floor. This one was made up of 5 or 6 slabs of cracked granite. At the pinnacle, an opening like the uncrowned top of a large chimney. From the forest floor, the top of the granite chimney was not easily accessible, making it necessary to approach the top from a tree. She jumped onto the granite top from her swinging vine and dropped into the dark hole. She was instantly gone from sight. Holding on to the last vine, I pushed myself with force from the branch on which I stood. Like a pendulum, I swayed out past my target. Upon swinging back, my toes gripped the edge. The landing on top of the tall rocky column was small. I only had a few feet to touch my moccasins onto the chimney and gain my balance. I landed on the stone in a crouched position and held on to the rim of the opening. A rope and pulley was knotted and wedged between 2 slabs of stone, and it stretched into the chasm where the girl had disappeared. Through the hole, 75 feet below me, was the glow of a warm fire in a well-hidden cavern. Little fires lit the inside of the limestone room. I felt like I was in a circular tomb. The low light was augmented by a few handmade candles that were placed around the circumference of the enclosure. It was almost like being on the inside of a cathedral dome. The walls were textured with a mottled surface that I later found to be ancient text carved into stone blocks that told the history of the island. The floor was a timeless mosaic of colored and glazed tiles, worn only by countless years of its existence and the feet of those knowledgeable enough to seek refuge there. The enclosure easily had a 60-foot diameter. Boxes and ship cabinets were neatly placed throughout the room. An oven and furnishings were carved from limestone and granite. A number of such masterful comforts adorned the walls and the floor of the sanctuary. 6 great Minoan columns, decorated with shining weapons and tools, marked the path to an antechamber and divided the space. The carved foyer formed a large cubical niche that led to a massive stone slab door. The quality of the air was not what one might expect from an underground dwelling. It was clean, as holes that marked the walls above and below the fire pit and oven helped to keep a fresh draft moving the air about in the structure. I turned a full 360 degrees and scanned the whole room, stopping my eyes at the warrior-like girl that faced me. Resting my eyes upon hers, I spoke. "I am Thomas. Where are we?" I held on to the rope that lowered me from the oculus at the top of the dome 75 feet above and waited for an answer. My eyes found hers staring at me impatiently.
I am Alexandra. But don't go screaming my name around the island.
She spoke slowly and quietly in the Greek language.
Thomas, you are in my home. This is my sanctuary on this island. I brought you here because I know you fight with the Babula, and you make him curse with rage. So you can be my friend. Although from watching you, I have learned that it is not enough for you to curse in English, you swear to God in Greek as well. But you swear about the monster, so I can forgive you.
I removed my foot from the stirrup at the end of the rope and pulley system that brought me into the center of the cavernous tomb and answered her. "Yes, Alexandra, I have despaired a number of times in my short time here, but I am happy that you have caught me. Where are we?" I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. Why are you here? What is the deal with the thylacines? What is this place? Why are you dressed like that? And are you a dream? Those were only a few of the questions on the top of my list. "How close are we to mainland?" I asked. She walked to a map pinned onto a wooden partition wall and pointed.
We are here, on Teleonisi, the last island on the fold.
I looked at the old, carefully preserved map and squinted at her fingertip and was quite bewildered. "But there is no island there. There was none when my ship wrecked. No, I must have drifted here." I pointed to another spot on the map and said it with full disbelief of my own voice. Somehow I must have drifted here, over 800 miles away. My voice trailed off into silence. I knew it just wasn't possible to have survived that kind of distance in the ocean with the injuries that I had sustained from the shipwreck. Alexandra moved my hand from the map and spoke again as she took the shining helmet off of her head.
I will explain later, but now I need sleep.
She pointed to the antechamber located at the other side of her domicile.
You will sleep over there. I must warn you, do not pull on any levers or open any doors. You might get hurt in doing so.
Her arm continued to indicate the direction that she wanted me to move to. I walked through a narrow doorway into a square room, tossed my bedding to the floor, and looked across the way, where she stood next to one of the massive columns. Alexandra pulled on a steel lever that was situated high on the pillar, and with a wry smile said,
"It is just that you don't seem smart enough to know a trap when you step into one."
Immediately, after releasing the lever, a large stone slab easily slid down into the jamb of the doorway to the anteroom. I have told you before that Alexandria is courteous, so it should not surprise you that she had equipped the room I found myself captured in with 4 lit candles, a tall carafe filled with water, a glass to drink from, and other amenities needed to serve a term of confinement. A wide seated bench was carved from the indigenous stone around 3/4 of the foyer. The only place without the dais was where the door leading in from the dome and the door presumably exiting out into the jungle were. Some vines and leaves had made their way under the worn edge of the massive stone egress. I looked back to the bench to find a plastic folder. It was a 3-ringed binder filled with paper. I opened it to find a message in my handwriting on a wrinkled and slightly torn piece of paper. It read, "I am stranded on this beach. Please wait until I come back. I am looking for civilization." On the pages that followed were handwritten records of things Alexandra had found important enough to document during her time on Teleonisi. It was an abbreviated compilation of who she was and what her beliefs and goals were. She had written about her experiences on the island. I became suspicious that she would not let me out of my new prison until I had read the whole thing. It was most unfortunate that I spoke her language better than I could read it, but her penmanship and ideas are clear and logical, so her story was easy to follow. Her theories about the placement of the island and stars were a bit of a stretch to believe, but her answers made more sense than any alternative theories. Had I not shared similar experiences, however, I would have thought she were a madwoman, a lunatic on the fringe of reality who mumbles about hallucinations and runs in the jungles with vicious and wild beasts. I suddenly realized how incredibly tired I was, but I determined to stay awake to learn what I could about my captor. I stretched my body on the solid bench and extinguished 3 of the candles. That night, my education began as I gained an understanding of her history and how she came to be on the island. The animals of the island and the native tribes on the southeast shore and the habits of Babula, the evil sea demon I had named Lernea, were integral to her stories. She was a tender-hearted soul, stranded on that brigadoon in the sea. Contrary to my primary encounter with her, the first impression being that of a stern lecturer, I found that she was a happy girl. No person on this earth could be so well adjusted to the trials that she had survived. She was both a hopeful child and a fierce warrior. I thought that I would have difficulty hiding my admiration for her, but I can tell her story plainly cast in the truth. I studied her father's logs and her own testimony and documentation to derive her history. As I read on, I realized that it had been years since she had spoken with another human being. She had been watching me on the island that she called Teleonisi. Translated from Greek, it meant the last island, or the final island, or, depending on the subtle intonation of the word, the perfect island. Ironically, since my arrival on the island, she had witnessed most of my adventures from the treetops and rocky cliffs during my incarceration on Teleonisi. She knew more about me than I did about her. For her, the long adventure started about 12 years before I washed up on the sandy northwestern shores of that place. The Archaeologist. Alexandra's father, John Satakis, was a ruggedly handsome and intelligent scholar who earned his credentials in the field of archaeology at the University of Athens, where he also met his future wife, Antigone. She was a well-versed anthropologist and kindred spirit. She and John combined their efforts in their studies and professions and rose to fame in their respective fields. Museums and universities around the world sought the advice and tutelage of the dynamic team. It seemed that every new artifact that they found or chronicled, and each ancient site that they visited, breathed their secrets to the two scientists. They often conducted independent studies, and more often than not, their conclusions dovetailed and complemented the other's findings and expertise. Some might think the couple were obsessed with the past and man's societal development, but it was far beyond an obsession. Unraveling the mysteries of men, gods, and myths had become a way of life for the two scientists. Inseparable, they naturally decided to marry their fortunes and lives together. The nature of their university work and studies afforded them opportunities for extensive travels that were frequently undertaken using their sailboat, the Theodoro, God's gift, to sail from island to island, enjoying their adventures, discoveries, and each other. Antigone gave up a position as director of the anthropology department at the university to nurture and raise her new and beautiful baby daughter. However, the bright and scholarly mother did not give up supporting her husband's work and continued to partner with John in discovering clues to the truth about time's most well-guarded mysteries of antiquity. Many authors have pondered nomenclature. Who is who, and does character define a name, or does a name define a character, are frequent questions. John and Antigone Satakis chose to name the jewel of their life, their baby girl, Alexandra, protector of man. They affectionately called the bright-eyed child Alexia. The girl proved to be an increasingly intelligent, curious, and fiery individual. John's journal entries cited many examples of Alexia's inquisitive and insightful nature. Once, when Alexandra was 8 years old, she noticed that a number of artifacts were improperly dated and saved John and Antigone the embarrassment of publishing a flawed article in an archaeological magazine read by many of the profession's top scholars. The little girl was not a hindrance to John and Antigone's professional endeavors. She was an addition to the resolute team. John was not absent-minded when it came to his daughter's development. It was more that his focus was on anthropologic and archaeologic artifacts. That focus led Alexia to certain insights that other children her age could not possibly have had. She was truly gifted. At the age of 10, after reading translations of ancient texts that her parents were working on, she suggested a possibility that set into motion a string of events that brought her family and her to Teleonisi.